The Crafty Gemini. I post weekly crafting, cooking, and organic gardening videos right here on my YouTube channel. In this video, we're jumping right into my Victorian Modern Video Quilt-Along series, and I'm going to teach you today how to make block number 1. Block number 1 is really quite easy to put together, even if you're a first-time quilter. What I'm going to do in this tutorial is show you everything you need to know, from cutting the fabric to piecing, pinning, pressing, everything, so that you can create the proper quilt block that we need for this design. Now, I'm also going to show you, when you're cutting the fabric, I'm going to walk you through how to cut out the pieces so that at the same time you're cutting out the patchwork pieces you need for one block, you're actually going to go ahead and at the same time cut out all the patchwork pieces you need for all 6 of the block number 1s required for this quilt top. So this is going to save you tons of time, and you'll be practically done with half of the quilt top once you finish these 6 blocks. Now let's go over the supplies and materials we'll need to complete our quilt top, especially for those beginners out there. So aside from things like fabric, thread, and your sewing machine, here are the other supplies that I recommend you have in order to get started to create your own quilt top. Here are 3 different size rulers, and these are the sizes that I recommend. Basically, with these 3 in your stash, you'll be able to create all kinds of different blocks, patterns, strips, and so these are the 3 that I go to when I'm working mostly with my patchwork projects, okay? And I'll include links to all these supplies in the description box underneath this video here on YouTube. Just click the tab that says About right underneath the video player. Then you'll see another tab that says Show More. When you click on that, it'll open up another window that has all the information that I've included there for you, so you know where you can purchase these supplies for yourself. So we've gone over the rulers. You're also going to need a rotary cutter. This is great for precision cutting. Then you're going to need the corresponding mat for the rotary cutter. Then I recommend some pins. And then we have our iron, which I would probably say is the next most important thing after my sewing machine. This is a must-have whenever I'm quilting. And it's just going to make your life a little bit easier, and it's going to give all your patchwork pieces a clean and crisp finish. Okay, so let's learn how to make this block. So the block itself is made up of one large center square. Then we have half square triangles on all 4 corners. We have solid squares right here, 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the sides of the center square. And then outlining these squares, we have narrower rectangular strips, okay? So for block number 1, let's pull out the fabrics that we're going to need, which are going to be these 4 that you see here. And these are going to make up basically the entire block except for that center square. All the center squares for every block, including both block 1 and block 2, are all going to measure the 8.5 inches square. So these are all going to be the same in every single block in our design. Now each one of these blocks requires 4 half square triangles, so you're going to end up with a total of 24 because there's 6 blocks. So let's show you how to cut those out first. Our half square triangle units are going to be made up of these 2 fabrics. And to get the 4 units that we need, we'll need to cut out 2 squares that measure 4 7/8 inches square from this one, and the same thing from this fabric. So let's get started, okay? I've ironed out any creases in my fabric. I like to set my fabric up so that I have the fold down here towards me, and then I have the selvages up this way, okay? So we'll put it like that. Make sure it's laying flat. We're going to clean off this edge, and I'm going to use my long ruler here. This is one of the reasons this is my all-time favorite ruler. I can have the fabric on the fold just like it came off the bolt, and you see the ruler reaches all the way across it, so it makes it real simple to clean off the edges and to cut some strips. So I'm only cutting off a little tiny bit. I want to save my fabric, okay? That's all I'm cutting off, just so that I'm starting off with a straight edge. Now I'm going to grab my 6.5 inch ruler here, and I'm going to put it so that I can cut my 4 7/8 inch strip. So I'm going to line up the 4 7/8 inch mark on the cut edge that I just cleaned up, okay? And then the bottom edge of my ruler is going to be lined up right on that fold, because I know that that's basically a guaranteed straight edge, so that I know that my ruler now is square, okay? I'm going to grab my long strip ruler and put it next to it, at the same time making sure that I'm lining up one of the straight lines on my ruler, on this ruler, with that fold of the fabric as well, okay? And this is basically what I do with my 2 rulers, like a 2 ruler trick, where I measure the strip I need with one ruler, then I bump up another one next to it, and now I can remove this ruler and cut right this way. If you're new to quilting, you'll oftentimes see that the quilt patterns call for measurements that are 3/8, 5/8, or 7/8 of an inch, and don't get worried about that. It's real simple. All it is that from 1 inch to the next is broken down into 1/8 inch increments. So all you need to do, like this pattern, we need 4 7/8. So what we're going to do is from the 4 inch to the 5 inch, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 little sticks out of the 8. So it's basically the one stick right before you reach the next full inch increment. And you can see that right there at that little line is where I've lined up my fabric underneath. So that's all there is to it. So I have my 4 7/8 inches. I have this strip. Sometimes what I like to do is kind of glide this ruler up, making sure that it's still measuring the 4 7/8 all the way up. And it is. So I can remove that ruler now. And now I'm going to cut with this one. And when you have a long ruler like this, you want to stop right to about where your fingers are. And then just walk them up carefully, making sure you don't move the ruler. And there's my first strip. Now we're going to go ahead and repeat the same thing and cut out another strip. Again, I'm lining it up at the 4 7/8 inch mark. The edge here of my ruler with the fold of my fabric. Bump up my second ruler next to it. I'm lining up a line with the bottom of the fabric there. I'm going to slide it up, make sure everything is good. Okay, so I have my 2 strips here. And I think we can cut out our squares from this. So let's put this fabric away. Now we're grabbing each individual strip, and I'm still keeping it folded. It's going to save me some time so I can cut 2 squares at a time. What we need to do is cut off these selvages here. So all you do is take one of your rulers, line up the bottom edge with this straight bottom raw edge here that you've cut. You know it's straight. It should be straight. I'm going to line it up there, and I'm just going to come a little bit over from the selvage so that I don't waste too much fabric, and I just cut off what I need to get rid of. And we're going to repeat that to this strip here. So let's start cutting out our squares. Now we need to measure 4 7/8 inches from this side as well, okay? Because we need squares that are 4 7/8 inches. So now to cut out my individual squares, I like to put my strip this way since I'm right-handed. Here's the 2 raw edges, and the fold should be on this side. Now the ruler, I'm just going to measure 4 7/8 inches in. And to do that, I'm going to use the red numbers that I see right here. Makes it real simple to use. Again, if you look, the red number 5 is right there. I'm lining it up with the 1 stick over from the 5, so I know that that's the 7/8 inch mark. Okay, lined up down here. I see it's lined up with 4 7/8 up here, so it looks like a perfect square. Hold my ruler and cut, and I've cut 2 squares. Okay, and you're going to need 12 like that to make all the blocks for your quilt, for the block ones. So again, measure 4 7/8. It's lined up there, 4 7/8 down here. And there's 4 now. Now because we cut out 8 squares from the first strip, we only needed to cut out 4 more from the second one. But if you cut them all up, sometimes I tend to do this so that I can have some extras in case I mess up. Just know that you'll have extra, but you'll only need 12 to make your block number 1s. Now we're going to take our second fabric here for the half square triangles, and you're going to cut out the exact same thing. So 12 squares, again, that measure 4 7/8 inches square. So let me teach you the prep work for these half square triangles. One is going to match up with one of the other fabric. Put them together with the pretty sides of the fabrics touching each other. Then before I pin, without moving them, I like to go put my ruler right there. And you can see the line is a 45-degree angle line. And if you have that line on your ruler, like this one, you want to line it up right there. And that way you know this is a straight angle going this way. Okay? And then with some kind of a fabric-safe marking device, you're just going to draw that line. I'm using a mechanical pencil. If you have one of those fabric markers, that works fine as well. Now that I have that line, I'm going to go ahead and pin this. And I just like to put 1 pin on each side of that line to help keep these together. And then just set them aside, okay? And then you're going to continue that and prep all 12 of your blocks. So now we're going to take this bundle to our sewing machine, and we want to sew a 1/4 inch to the right of this line, going straight down this way, and another 1/4 inch to the left of this line going all the way down. And then when you're done with the whole strip like that, all you need to do is turn it over and then start sewing on the other side of the line. So now I'm going to go to this side of it. At this point, I'll bring all my pieces over and just carefully cut the threads in between them to separate each unit out. And now I'm going to line up my ruler back on the same line that I drew out before, the one that you used as a guide. You're going to line your ruler up on that line, and now you're going to slice this unit in half. And so what happens is you end up with 2 half square triangle units. Now here's how I press them. Flat, open, and you're going to press towards the darker color. So I want the seam allowance behind the blue. Now we need to trim these down, and if you look closely, you'll see that there's 2 little chunks of fabric sticking out on both corners. That's what we call dog ears in quilting, and you want to trim those off. But what I do is that I'm going to trim down the block at the same time I cut those off, just to save myself an extra step. When you measure these, they should measure 4.5 inches square, okay? So I'm going to line it up, and what I do is I'm going to line up the 45-degree line that's running from corner to corner on my ruler. I'm lining it up on this center line here because I know that that should be 45 degrees. And then we're going to see what we have excess on the sides, okay? So I have a little bit extra here, so I'm going to trim this down with the dog ear right there. Gone. And then just repeat the process for each one of your blocks so that we make sure we're starting off with the blocks that we need. So once these are trimmed to size, you can set them aside, and we're going to start cutting out the other pieces we need for block number 1. Second fabric here, our fabric is pressed. Always want to start off with a nice clean straight edge. Okay? And from this fabric, we need to cut out 4.5 inch squares. So we're going to need 4 per block, which tells us that we're going to need 24 for the whole quilt. So all we need to do is the same thing we did before, but this time we're measuring at 4.5 inches. So I'm lining up my ruler at the 4.5 inch mark right here. I know that this, all the way till I get to this edge, this is the 4.5 inch strip that I want. So I'm going to bump up my second ruler, then I'm going to slide it up, make sure I'm... Okay, we have our 3 strips. So next one we can put aside. So my 24 4.5 inch square pieces are cut. We can move that aside. Moving on to the next fabric is this one. And for this one, each block number 1 needs 8 pieces, okay? 8 patches that measure 2.5 by 4.5. And so because it's not going to be a square, but instead a rectangle, what I like to do is I'm going to cut larger strips. So I'm going to go with the 4.5 inch, and then we're going to cut that one into smaller chunks of 2.5, okay? And now I'm going to cut 2.5 inch increments from here. And since the strip is folded, again, we're cutting off 2 at a time. So there's 2. And you're going to repeat this until you end up with 48 pieces. 16 from each strip. So we're going to cut 3 of these strips up. Okay, so now that we've cut all 48 of these, we can set them aside as well. And now what we need to do is cut out one of our pieces here for the center block of block number 1. And in the yardage that I required for this quilt top, I know I had you get a 1/4 yard of each of these, but what I did was I gave you a variety of them, so this way you can switch up the center blocks for both your block 1 and block 2 to match up, you know, to put whatever center blocks you want. So for this first one, I'm going to use this pink butterfly fabric. It's so pretty. And I'm actually just going to cut out 1. You can cut it out doubled if you know you want to use this block on another block. Okay, so all our units are done for block number 1. Let me show you how we would assemble it. Okay, so let's start sewing. I'm going to start off by combining these 3, and the same thing for all the ones on the sides here, to make it one flat rectangle, all pieced together. And so what I like to do is lay out my entire block and then start piecing it piece by piece to make sure that I'm sewing the pieces correctly. So what I did here was I just took this one, turned it onto the center square here. I'm lining up these raw edges, and then we're just going to place some pins along that edge right there. And take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to use our scant 1/4 inch seam allowance to stitch it down this side. And so real briefly, I want to go over what I mean when I say scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. I used white thread, so you probably can't see it, but you can see where the thread is there. And when I line this up on this ruler, this dashed line is going to mark the 1/4 inch from this top edge. So if I put my ruler up on the edge of my fabric piece, you can see that the 1/4 inch mark is slightly underneath my actual stitching line. And so that's what I mean by scant 1/4 inch. It's kind of like almost a 1/4 inch, but it's not exactly there. And this is going to help so that your patchwork pieces end up being exactly the size that we want them to be, so everything can match up nicely. Because we have to account for, we do want it to end up being a 1/4 inch, but we need to account for a little bit of the fabric that ends up getting taken up when we fold and press it open. And then also, depending on the thickness of the thread that you're using, that also takes up a little bit of space. So it sounds like a really tiny bit of stuff to deal with, but once you start carrying it over on so many patchwork pieces, it ends up adding up quite a bit at the end. So figure out what you need to do on your sewing machine or your presser foot so that you can end up stitching a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 threads smaller than the actual true 1/4 inch. So here's my scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, I didn't backstitch at the beginning or at the end, and that's just because this is going to be sewn to something else, and so I'll have an intersecting seam on each end. But if you want to take a back stitch quickly, you can do that as well. It's just a matter of preference. The next step is to press our piece, and I don't open it yet. I leave it just as it was stitched at the sewing machine. I press it flat right there, and then I'll open it and press the seam towards the darker fabric, which in this case is this darker, this blue color. And so I will lift up on this side, push the tip in that crease line of where the seam is, and then just press flat, okay? And you're going to repeat that pressing process to every single seam that you stitch when you're quilting. Okay, so this one has been sewn here. Now I'm going to sew this one to here. Now that these 4 units are put together, you can tell if they've been sewn correctly because the finished size should measure exactly the 8.5 inches like you see here. So this should measure 4.5 inches by 8.5 inches, this full unit of 3. And so if it doesn't, you can measure it. If it doesn't, go ahead and just trim it just a little bit. I can see that this one I have a little bit more there. And so just trim a little bit off the sides if you need to bring it down to size. Once you have those units sewn together, you can see that now everything is going to fit nicely. So we can start piecing the whole thing together. And so what I'm going to do is sew this one here, then sew this one here. And do the same thing for these. Like that, okay? So I've sewn my block up into 3 units, and now we can put them together. And the good thing about this block is that there's not that many intersecting points, especially for beginners. If I had to match up like every single one of these with another patchwork piece, it would be a little intimidating for beginners. But for the whole block, all you have are 4 corners. And so what I mean by the intersecting blocks is that if you look closely here, when this gets sewn in, this corner of this center block should be pointed up right up against the corner of this, so you get a nice crisp point on all 4 points. And to do that, I'm going to turn this here, and I'm going to place a pin right at that intersection because I want those 2 seams to abut there nicely. And this, you can see what happens. I push the seams to the darker fabrics, and so now I have 1 seam going to the left and 1 coming to the right. So they're both going to abut nicely right at that intersection. That's what you want. I'm going to put my pin right through that intersection. So when I'm sewing, I make sure that that doesn't move on me, and I'll get nice, crisp intersecting points right there. On this one, same thing. And then I'm going to do the same thing to this one, so I only have to take it over to the sewing machine 1 time. And remember, this is the point where there should be intersected right there. So once your block is all sewn up, you should end up with 4 nice intersecting points right here on the corners. Then you want to take your ruler and measure to make sure that it measures 16.5 inches by 16.5. And so that's the measurement that we're aiming towards. If you're off by a little bit or a lot, don't worry. We can always trim it up a little bit. It's pretty much exactly 16.5 there. And you can check on the seam lines. Right here, it's perfect, 16.5. And so that looks good. Then you also just turn it on the other side and repeat the process. You know, make sure that you're close or close enough. So that's it. Your block number 1 is done. The first one is out of the way. So your homework for next week is to make 5 more like this. So you end up with a total of 6 block number 1s. They're nice and big. And so when you're putting them together, the center block here, all the fabrics that are in your supply list that are only measured at 1/4 yard, all of those pieces are the ones that I've put down there for you to cut up into the 8.5 inch square pieces to use as the center of your blocks. So go ahead and just choose whichever ones of those fabrics you want to be your center blocks, and we'll go from there. I'll see you next week. Hope you have 6 of these done, and next week I'll teach you all how to make block number 2. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. If you did, go ahead and hit it with a thumbs up below, share it across the different social media sites, and now here's the announcement of last week's giveaway winners. Congratulations! giveaway prizes are a fat quarter bundle of the Victorian Modern line offered up by Andover Fabrics, and also another lucky winner is going to receive the 3 easy quilting ruler set that I've been using for this quilt top, and those have been offered up by Simplicity. To enter this week's giveaway, all you need to do is click the subscribe button right there to make sure that you're subscribed to my channel so you won't miss out on any of my new weekly video tutorials. Secondly, I'd like for you to head on over to Facebook if you have a Facebook account and check out my page and our sponsors pages. And lastly, go ahead and leave me a comment underneath this video right here on YouTube letting me know what part of the quilt making process do you have the most trouble with. I'll be sure to read every single answer, and I'll do my best to help answer those questions for you or show you the techniques on how I like to do things in future videos. This giveaway is open to all my worldwide viewers, so good luck to everyone entering the giveaway. A big thanks to all of our sponsoring companies. Thanks for watching. Go do your homework, and I'll see you next week. Bye.